Okay, so they didn't address the pass coverage. They did address the pass rush. It's the one thing they addressed before the trade deadline. They traded for Chase Young, who has 5 sacks this year, but Washington didn't want him. Washington traded him for a late 3rd-round pick, and the Niners might not even re-sign him next year. He's on his last year of his contract. It seems to me that this is a little bit of a distraction, the Chase Young thing. It's nice, but it doesn't necessarily tip the scales for the Niners or make them Super Bowl favorites. What would make them Super Bowl favorites is if Nick Bosa started doing what he used to do the last few years. And I don't know if Chase Young is going to unlock Nick Bosa or not, but I think that's really the story here, that the Niners still haven't found what's the deal with Nick Bosa. He went from being the best player to a very good player. And I don't know that Chase Young necessarily fixes that. They need to figure out why Nick Bosa can't get going. Who is it? Steve Wilkes' fault or is it Nick Bosa's fault?
You know, it's very interesting. There's very little talk about Bosa. He signed a big contract, and he's acknowledged to be one of the best defensive players in the league. There's very little talk about what's wrong with him. Iggy, he doesn't have a lot of sacks, right?
2.5.
No big deal.
So he's on Chase Young has 5 sacks this year.
Yeah, that's how much is that per sack that they're paying him. Right. And so do you think that teams in a way have figured out how to play him?
I think so. I think part of it is that the coverage is so soft. The ball's coming out quick. They're running the ball well. There's fewer pass rush opportunities. But so you could blame Steve Wilkes a little bit, but this goes back to last year. He had no sacks in the playoffs last year. So I think maybe what happened is he played a lot the last couple of years. He tried very hard to get that contract. He got the contract. In the process, he wore himself down. He was out of gas at the end of last season. He missed the entire offseason this year. And he's not quite the guy he was when he was locked in. I mean, he missed the whole offseason. Maybe that Nick Bosa isn't going to be here this year. And he needs to try again next year with a full mini camp, training camp, preseason.
What about the thinking that having Chase Young on the other side provides another weapon, and they'd have to address him and maybe not address Bosa as strongly?
If you were an offensive coordinator, Dad, would you be worried about Bosa or Chase Young?
Bosa.
So I don't think this changes anything for Bosa. This gives Chase Young some opportunities to go one-on-one, and if he's good, he might get some sacks, but Washington doesn't think he's good. No one else in the league was interested. The Niners think they can essentially change Chase Young. Like, he's a little unmotivated. He's a little unprofessional. He doesn't follow his assignments all the time, but for us, he will, because we're a really good team and we have a winning culture and we have standards here. It's like, you guys have lost 3 games in a row. I don't know who you think you are. Maybe you'll get the best out of Chase Young, or maybe Chase Young will come here and just continue to be the person he's always been, the player he's always been.
I want to tell you what I think is a phony issue that's been talked about during the bye week, whether poor Steve Wilkes should stay in the booth or come down and be on the field. If there ever was a red herring, if there ever was a phony argument, who cares where he is? I care if he's a good defensive coordinator. Fangio stays in the booth. Dan Quinn stays in the booth. So he's on the field. He won't see the patterns as well. It's not what he's comfortable doing. Iggy, it seems to me that Kyle got this poor man, who's a man of dignity and a good coach, and is asking him to do everything he never did before. Yeah. The wide 9 he never did before. Come down to the field he never did before. So you'll come to us, but you won't be yourself. What a position to put him in.
Well, he has been on the field before. He's been a head coach. So I guess it's a little surprising that he would want to be in the booth as a coordinator, but Kyle was in the booth as a coordinator. Now he's a head coach. He's on the field. It seems to me like if you bring him on the field, that doesn't change who he is. What made D'Amico and Robert Saleh, their presence, I don't know, important or unique is like how enthusiastic they were. You'd see them. There was a guy dedicated to holding Robert Saleh back from going on the field because it was a penalty. He would run and jump into the players and give them chest bumps. I don't know. That's not Steve Wilkes. He's not going to do stuff like that. So he could be on the field, but he's still going to be the same, dignified, reserved, grown up that he would be in the booth. It doesn't change anything. If you wanted a more of a rah-rah guy, you should have got a rah-rah guy.
Yeah, it's a phony issue where he should position himself. Speaking of Saleh, he didn't seem so rah-rah last night.
He seemed shell-shocked.
Yep.
They kept cutting to him, and he was like,
I know.
Jeez,
Boy, was
I
his
don't
team
understand how that
not
team was
ready.
so unprepared. Wow.
Unprepared.
Yeah.
Iggy, are there other issues that they should have thought about? Excuse me.
I like
On
that you
the
brought up the
defense.
Steve Wilks thing, though, because to me, if that's all the Niners are thinking about, let's add a pass rusher and move Steve Wilks' position during games. Once again, you didn't really look in the mirror. That's not introspection. That's not what you.
No,
That's like, let's add one. We're one player away, and Steve Wilks needs to change his location. Nah, you didn't dig nearly deep enough. The
I
problems are
agree.
way deeper than that. So,
I agree.
Jax dollar, thank you, Zach Rivero, $5. Niners need a huge blowout win against Jags, in my opinion. Both defense and offense. Glad to see you doing better, Papa Cohn. They need a win. They need if
Thanks,
they win
Zach.
by one.
They need a win.
Jack says the Niners need to bring in Willis or Sherman. What is a
Could
defensive
I
coordinator?
hold on? That's a fan speaking, and fans, of course, are entitled to speak. What pedigree does either one of them have to be a defensive coordinator? That's a
Yeah,
lot of work. That's a lot of conceptual stuff. Richard Sherman and Willis, they haven't shown that they've done the work or that they have a desire.
right. It seems to me if you want to be a head coach or a defensive coordinator, you should go through the proper channels. Like D'Amico Ryans, he was
Yeah,
a excellent football player. Then he came to the 49ers and was a quality control coach for a year, and then a
yeah,
linebacker coach for 3 years, and then he became a coordinator. So you got to pay your dues and show that you can do every step of the process. Kyle Shanahan did, D'Amico did,
yeah.
Sherman would have to. And that's like a lot of hours for not that much money. How much money you think D'Amico Ryans made as a quality control coach that year? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I don't
A
know.
little bit, yeah. It's
Yeah.
almost an honorary position. So the
Yeah.
point is, I don't think Richard Sherman would want to work that hard for that kind of money. He has a big personality. He wants to be on TV.
Absolutely. More money for
Yeah,
less work. Mhm.
yeah.
Tia Ingram says, my hubby had COVID and was tired for a month afterwards.
Thanks for telling me that. It's been a couple of weeks, a week and a half for me. I still have the cough, as you can hear. And boy, am I tired. But in other words, but after a month, he felt okay, I hope.
Jack says, not just as a DC, but as a hype man on the sideline. I don't think you can really have a hype man on the sideline if he's not a defensive coordinator. Like, you don't know this, but Deshaun Goldson is on the 49ers coaching staff. He was a very passionate player. He's not the defensive coordinator. He can't get the Niners hyped up. His name is, remember Deshaun? 38.
Yeah, I do.
LVL7 says, Brock Purdy's a fraud. I can't believe some of you fans think he's better than Kyler.
Oh,
That's
I'd
so
prefer
random.
to have. Wait a minute. I'd rather have him than Kyler. First of all, how's Kyler doing this year?
Good question. I don't see how you can
Where
win when Kyler Murray's making all that money and he doesn't even like really care about the game that much. He's playing video games. How do you do
Yeah.
that? I don't know. I don't think so.